What's going on, guys? And today I'm starting a little mini series for the trade deadline season, and that's one trade each team should do to improve their roster. Now, not all these teams need trades, and I'll mention that before mentioning the trades that I thought of, but these are the trades I think will help out the teams the most. So for this video, and the way I'm going to be doing these videos, I'm going to be breaking them up into divisions. So I'm doing the Atlantic Division first, which consists of the Celtics, Knicks, Nets, Sixers, and the Toronto Raptors. So let's get started. First team is the Boston Celtics. Now, the thing I think they need the most is a shot blocker and a rebounder. Al Horford can do both of these, but he's more comfortable stepping out and playing more of the forward position. So I think they need a legitimate 5. Ideally, the best guy would probably be someone like Nerlens Noel, and I think that's a great trade, and I'll talk about that later in this video. But the thing is, I'm going to put up some variety and some other ideas because almost everyone is suggesting a Nerlens trade, and I actually would like that for that team. However, this is a little bit different view, and one that I think that they could actually sacrifice less and get more. So this trade would consist of James Young and Terry Rozier, and in return, the Celtics will get Jusuf Nurkic from the Denver Nuggets. Now, the reason why the Celtics would do this is both these young players don't have a huge spot on the team, where Terry Rozier is actually starting to look a little bit better, but his minutes are still kind of low, and he can be a solid player in some time. However, the thing about him is that I feel like there's too much of a logjam at the point guard, and he's not good enough to break through Isaiah Thomas or Marcus Smart. So at the best, he'll be the 3rd point guard and maybe the 5th guard off the bench, and I think that's unfair to him, and he needs a better opportunity somewhere else. Now, for James Young, that was a completely failed experiment. Of course, he's still very young. He's probably 22 at the oldest. However, the Celtics picked him really high. I believe he was 13th, and he has shown nothing in his time in the NBA so far. So I think it's time to move on from him. And the reason why I think the Nuggets will do this is because of the fact that Jusuf Nurkic isn't even playing anymore. He's fallen completely out the rotation, and he's just basically a waste right now. He's just a person on a roster. So the Celtics would be happy to pick him up, and I think the Nuggets, would be happy to pick up a young guy in Rozier, even though they have tons of young guards who can be pretty special and possibly overtake guys such as Jameer Nelson in the rotation, be a nice backup in the future to a guy in Emmanuel Mudiay. And James Young, this is just a complete experiment. Maybe he might develop, and the thing is, if he develops, good for them. He could become maybe a solid backup player, but we don't know that as of right now. Now, the reason why the Celtics should do this is Nurkic is pretty much a great center that fit perfectly right next to Al Horford. Nurkic is a great rebounder and rim protector, and both those things, as I mentioned earlier, Horford isn't doing so well this year. He's actually averaging over 2 blocks per game, Horford is, but I think the real issue with the Celtics is they need more rim protection. Because the thing is, they're playing at power forward right now, Amir Johnson, who's kind of washed up. So I think if you slide Horford to the 4, which is the only time he's had huge success back in Florida, and you keep a guy like Nurkic at the 5, I think that will help the Celtics quite a bit. Alright, for my next team, I'm going to be talking about the Brooklyn Nets. Now, the Brooklyn Nets, the main issue with them is they're not very good, and they don't have a lot of young pieces. So I think what they need is just to pick up young players and hope that they develop. There's tons of guys in the NBA, but I think one that's definitely expendable is Terrence Ross. So for this trade, the Brooklyn Nets would give up Randy Foye and Justin Hamilton, and in return, pick up Terrence Ross. Now, the reason why this works for the Nets, or it should work for the Nets, is because they don't have any really good young players. The only notable young players you think on their team is maybe Jeremy Lin. They got Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, who seems okay. They got Sean Kilpatrick, who isn't even that young. They got Karis LeVert and maybe Isaiah Whitehead. It's a very weak young team. So I think what they really need is a good young player. And Terrence Ross, I feel like, can be pretty special on this team. He did drop over 50 points once in his career, and hopefully this explosive scoring ability can develop him into a true NBA starter. Now, the reason why I think the Raptors could take this trade is because one issue that they struggle with is shooting. At least I feel they do, where their best shooter is Kyle Lowry, who's a good shooter, but besides that, they don't have tons of shooters on their team, as DeRozan is not that, Valanciunas is not that, and Patrick Patterson is, but he hasn't been doing too well shooting this year. And at the 3 spot, they do have DeMario Carroll, but he's kind of looking a little washed up. So I think in return, they can pick up a stretch 4, which is something that they need right now, as Jared Sullinger was going to be that before he's had a lot of injuries. and have a solid backup shooting guard in Randy Foye, who can do quite a bit of things. So I think this is good for both teams. And I'm trying to keep these trades realistic. Maybe this one is a little bit more favored towards the Nets side, but regardless, I think this is absolutely great for the Nets. Alright, going on to the next team, I have the New York Knicks, and I have this trade of Joakim Noah for Greg Monroe. Now, this will help out the Knicks more than anything because of the fact that the Knicks absolutely cannot have Joakim Noah on their team anymore. He is a good rebounder, but that's basically it at this point in his career. He's shooting, I believe, under 30% from the line and is struggling from everywhere on the field. He has a monster contract, and honestly, if this wasn't a trade and what they should redo, if the Knicks could do one thing over again, it would definitely get rid of Joakim Noah and never sign him in the first place. He's had a horrible year, but saying that, I think the Milwaukee Bucks would be a good trade partner for them, and giving up Greg Monroe seems pretty fair. Now, first things first, the Bucks are trying to get rid of Greg Monroe at almost any cost right now because of the fact that he has a monster contract and he is basically on the bench for them and he isn't playing much. Now, Greg Monroe would be great to have on the New York Knicks because the thing is, the things that Joakim Noah is supposed to bring in terms of defense and rebounding, he's brought the rebounding, but he hasn't brought much defense or a huge impact on that end. And even though they might have wanted a shot blocker, and Greg Monroe is not that, Kristaps Porzingis is one of the better rim protector and shot blockers in the league, so they can deal with that. And definitely having the 4 or 5 combo of Porzingis and Greg Monroe would be really special for the team because the fact that having another guy who can score, because I feel like that's another issue for them. Besides Carmelo, you don't have a guy who can consistently put up maybe 22 a night. I know Kristaps is getting there, and Derrick Rose is all right at scoring. He's looking a lot better now. But I feel like they don't have a guy who can consistently go out there, just get you, good stat line of probably 17 points and 10 or 11 boards, maybe a couple assists, and I feel like that's what Greg Monroe can do for you. So I think this would be a good trade for the New York Knicks, and the reason why I see the Bucks doing this is the biggest issue for the Bucks right now is they don't have a point guard. I mean, Giannis is that, but they don't have a point guard. I mean, Giannis can fix that issue, and they don't really have a great center. I do like John Henson quite a bit. However, the thing is he doesn't play that much, and even when he does, it doesn't seem like they have a lot of trust in him. So I think if they have Joakim Noah, they can find a way to make him their starting center and really improve on their defense, make everything better. And their starting lineup, if they have it around something like a Giannis, Malcolm Brogdon, Jabari Parker kind of thing, then you also have Joakim Noah, I think it can be a pretty solid team as well. Alright, moving on to the next team, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, this is the trade I want to talk about, the Nerlens to Boston. So in this trade, Nerlens would go to Boston. In return, the Sixers would get Marcus Smart and possibly, let's say, like a second-round pick or a future first. Now, the reason why I think the Celtics would do this is, as I mentioned earlier, they need a shot blocker on their team and a legitimate center to just play down low, get the boards, get some blocks, and, I think Nerlens is the perfect example of that, and he's the perfect example of the modern-day center, the athletic, catching lobs kind of guy. Now, the reason why I think the Sixers should do this is because the weakest position by far for the Sixers is guard. Whether it be point guard or shooting guard, I think it actually might be point guard. Yes, Ben Simmons might come back, and I think he could be a pretty solid point guard or point forward, and he's one of my favorite young players in the league right now. However, I still think that they need a good young guard, and Marcus Smart is that. He doesn't fit too well in the Celtics. He's not a great shooter. However, the thing is, he can play great defense, and he's a really good role player to have. I think he'd be perfect for the Sixers, even when they start to develop more players. So the Sixers should definitely do this, as Nerlens is also falling on their rotation, and he's not happy there. So make him happy, make the team happy, and get a young guy out of it in Marcus Smart. Now, the final trade I have, this is a trade that, as I mentioned earlier, might not really should go through, but this is just one because I want to do one for every team. It's for the Toronto Raptors. I say they trade away Patrick Patterson, and in return, they get Brandon Wright from the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, the reason why I don't think that this is great is because I feel like the Raptors have hit their ceiling, and it's a pretty good ceiling, that the only way for them to really improve is a huge trade, like a Jonas Valanciunas, or trading away maybe a DeRozan or a Kyle Lowry. And I don't want to do that in this video of blockbuster monster trades, especially for teams that are that good. So I don't think it's really worth it for them, because the whole thing is, in the NBA, you always want to have a decent team because you never know when injuries are going to occur and anything can happen. And that's when we saw the Grizzlies a couple years ago make it to the conference finals. Of course, they were a good team, but they got kind of lucky with injuries and were able to make the conference finals. Yes, they never won a title, and this Grizzlies team may never win a title. But the thing is, having a team that consistently wins 50 wins and has a really great record and always has fun and makes the playoffs, that's still a great thing to have for a franchise and for a city. So this is why I don't think the Raptors should make this trade, but if I was going to have one, I'd say this trade. The reason why I would do it is Patrick Patterson is pretty good at defense and stretching the floor. However, this year he's struggling, and Brandon Wright, even though he's injured, when he comes back, he can help out with the Raptors struggling the most, which is rim protection and rebounding. They're one of the lowest teams in terms of total rebounds per game, and I think Brandon Wright is a pretty solid rebounder. He doesn't average a lot, but he's, as I mentioned earlier, like Nerlens Noel, a modern-day lob-catching, shot-blocking center. So I feel like he'd play pretty well next to Jonas Valanciunas. They would develop a pretty good chemistry and a pretty good front court consisting around these two. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, don't hate on me for this trade, Raptors fans, because personally I think your team is solid enough to make it to the conference finals or close enough to it again. And I think they're good enough as they are right now, but this is just because I want to make a trade for every team. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I have a couple more videos ready to make right now. So definitely give me a thumbs up, comment down below any other trades you'd like to see in the Atlantic Division, subscribe so you can get the newest videos when they come out, share anywhere you want to, and of course, have a good day.